My name is Susan Rosenberger. I'm a domestic terrorist. I served 16 years in prison of a 58-year sentence. Bill Clinton pardoned me on the last day in his office. I run a group that is the fiscal sponsor of Black Lives Matter and determine where most of the money goes. Can you imagine sitting back that you haven't heard a peep from the mainstream media exposing Black Lives Matter's ties to convicted domestic terrorists? Well, it's probably a conspiracy theory. But even if we come over to liberal owned Snopes, did a convicted terrorist sit? It should say, does a convicted terrorist currently sit on the board of BLM funding body? Well, yeah. They say it's a mixture. It all depends on what, here it is. Here's what's undetermined. The absence of a single universally agreed definition of terrorism. That's why they're saying it's a mix. She's not a terrorist. Susan Rosenberg, born 5 October 1955, is an American activist, a writer only in prison, an advocate for social justice and prisoners' rights. From the late 1970s into the mid 1980s, Rosenberg was active in the far left revolutionary terrorist May 19 communist organization M19 Co. The far left revolutionary terrorist May 19th communist organization, which according to contemporaneous FBI reports, openly advocated the overthrow of the U.S. government through armed struggle and the use of violence. But it depends on your definition of terrorist. Now, M19 Co. provided support of an offshoot of the Black Liberation Army, Black Lives Matter, including an armored truck robberies, and later engaged in bombings of government buildings. She was responsible for the bombing of a federal building, and she also took part in the murder of 2 police officers during a Brinks truck robbery. But according to Snopes, it's undetermined in the absence of a single universally agreed definition of terrorism that she's not a terrorist. And I hope you don't go to Snopes for fact checking, because Susan Rosenberger has served as vice chair of the board of directors for Thousand Currents, an organization that provides fundraising and fiscal sponsorship for BLM. Now, I don't know if you know what that means. That means that a fiscal sponsor that's a 501c3 like Thousand Currents, they're tax deductible. So you can give them millions of dollars and write it off. You don't have to pay taxes. So if you owe $100,000 and you're a liberal, you just give it to Thousand Currents and you don't have to pay $100,000 in taxes. It's deductible. It's a write-off. Now, thankfully, we just became a 501c3 today, and we'll have a video up on that. We're official. So you can donate huge amounts of money to us to fight this nonsense. But we'll get to that. Susan Rosenberg is a terrorist, according to Wikipedia, and every other single sentient being on Earth. Anyone that is engaged in the overthrow of the U.S. government through armed struggle and the use of violence, that's the definition of terrorist. And if she lives in America, she's a domestic terrorist, for goodness sakes. Yet she is now responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars from multinational corporations that funneled the money through Thousand Currents to the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, let's see what Black Lives Matter is all about, according to Thousand Currents. It's a home to Black folks and their global allies. Well, I'm an ally of all folks, so I'm an ally of BLM. As they demand the world where Black people be liberated. Well, Black people are free in America, so I don't know how we have to liberate them. And the only slave trades happening currently are overseas. There's no slavery in America, but there is rampant slavery worldwide, including North Korea and other places. But BLM doesn't care about that. In fact, BLM is a chapter-based member-led organization, like any community organization, whose mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build power to intervene in violence afflicted on Black communities. Only they're inflicting violence on their own Black communities, which would be an oxymoron. They support the lives of Black, queer, and transgender communities, the disabled, those with records, women, and all Black lives along the gender spectrum, by combating and countering acts of violence. Combating and countering acts of violence. That sounds like a nonviolent group. Creating space for Black imagination and innovation, and centering Black joy. We are winning immediate improvements in our lives. The affirmation that Black Lives Matter has resonated all over the globe as an expanding. Wow, they sound amazing. Let's see what they're doing.
In Portland, Oregon, protests continued for the 56th night in a row.
56.
Once they turned violent, federal agents responded with tear gas. The crowd finally leaving early Friday morning.
Wow, that sounds like amazing opportunities for the underprivileged Black people that they're working for. Burning federal buildings, that's great.
Though the protests have primarily been focused on racism and police brutality, some in attendance say they've taken on a new tone, opposing the federal law enforcement presence in a major American city.
If they're going to be violent, we have to match them.
They are definitely not being discriminatory about what they shoot at you. All they care is that it hits you and it hurts.
Police have accused protesters of throwing Molotov cocktails and other projectiles at agents.
Yeah, these peaceful protesters have bombs and explosives with them. Yeah, that makes sense. Most peaceful protesters come with weapons. I know, because I'm an organizer. Not a single person is allowed to have a weapon or an explosive at any of my marches. When I organized the march against Monsanto in Philadelphia, the #1 protocol was us to teach peaceful protesting. How to identify agent provocateurs or violent inciters. Apparently, the Black Lives Matter movement that claims that they are for you and for the betterment of your communities, that burns your own communities, doesn't know the first thing about community organizing. Yet the Black community has been community organizing for decades, 7 decades. And they are, in fact, the leader. And it's where I learned most of my tactics. But let's see what they actually are doing.
On some of the protesters.
Some.
At first, protesters were disruptive, blocking all lanes of I-94, but peaceful.
Now, let me just tell you that you're not allowed to block a highway ever. It's illegal. And so this is being allowed by governments in cities worldwide. You can't just block a highway. It's a right of way. You can if you have a permit, but they typically wouldn't allow you to block a highway unless you're beginning a march and you're going somewhere. These are spontaneously organized, egregious things that are being spontaneously organized to block traffic, to create noise, which are completely illegal based on local laws. Now, if you don't want to ruffle feathers and you want to actually do things legally, you can get a permit to do this. But this is not permitted. So the police have every right to go in and end this from the very beginning, which they didn't until people started throwing explosives at them. Well, and then it's over. It's over, Johnny.
Unlawful assembly, you are subject to arrest.
Police gave more than 25 warnings to leave. Hundreds.
So usually the police give 3 warnings. In this case, 25. I think that's quite enough. and then someone threw a bomb.
On the freeway, on the bridge. Police say the protest became a riot.
And protesters last night turned into criminals, and I'm absolutely disgusted
by the acts of some, not all, but some.
Some of those people threw projectiles on or near the freeway.
One of the rocks actually hit the officer's badge and actually scraped off the entire front of the badge.
He's got a bottle. He's got a bottle, mark him.
We had 21 police officers last night that were injured. Rocks, bottles, rebar.
Yeah, those are very peaceful people trying to send a message that they're criminals based on law. And if you don't get that, then you don't understand anything I've said. Black Lives Matter, their mission statement, is illegal. They're not even, if they ever were to file as a nonprofit or a group, it would be easy to prove that they do not live up to the name of what they claim they are. They never have, not in one single city. They're funneling hundreds of millions of dollars through 1,000 currents, whose vice chair is Susan Rosenberg, a convicted domestic terrorist that has killed police. Is that, I mean, your mind should be exploding. She's involved in crimes to rob Brinks trucks with guns. She's an accessory to murder for police. She's blown up buildings, and she was caught with hundreds of pounds of explosives on the day she was arrested. Yet Bill Clinton released her on the last day of his presidency because it met the agenda that he's part of, the globalist agenda to overthrow the government, which you're now living. And even Snopes confirmed it, that a convicted terrorist, based on definition, is the vice chair of 1,000 Currents, which is the fiscal sponsor for hundreds of millions of dollars from multinational corporations that you purchase products from, funded to the corporation that is now attacking the country.
Some of those people threw projectiles on or near the freeway.
One of the rocks actually hit the officer's badge and
I hope you got something out of the video. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. When the powers that be are funneling money into corporations, which are funneling money into organizations, which were set up to overthrow the U.S. government through armed struggle and the use of violence. What say you? Leave a comment below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and share this with people that care about the country they live in, because I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. 15 years. This is coming to the end. This is coming to a head. Are you with us? I hope so.